The rain stopped just before dawn, but the hill kept moving. I could hear it under the floorboards. Tiny pops. Soft grinding. Like someone twisting glass deep underground. The crack across the unfinished pool deck had widened another inch by sunrise. Muddy water dripped through it in slow, steady lines. Vanessa tried covering it with a blue tarp while her contractors smoked cigarettes beside the trench pretending nothing was wrong. One of them kept glancing downhill. He knew. The air smelled wrong now. Wet concrete. Clay. Fresh asphalt. And underneath all of it, that cold mineral smell that shows up before a slope gives way. I grabbed my field tablet from the garage and walked the ridge line in work boots still soaked from the night before. The retaining berm looked worse in daylight. The excavator had ripped straight through the compacted spine holding runoff pressure against the west hill. They had also crushed 2 drainage vents buried under the clay. That explained the humming under the neighborhood. Pressure was building with nowhere to release. I stopped near the broken runoff pipe and pressed my hand against the ground. It vibrated back. Not hard. Just enough to feel through the mud. Like the hill had a pulse now. Down below, Willow Creek Estates looked peaceful from a distance. Perfect driveways. Trimmed hedges. White fences still shining from the rain. People walked dogs with coffee cups in hand while contractors unloaded patio stone for Vanessa's clubhouse expansion. Nobody noticed the road near Lot 14 had sunk almost half an inch overnight. Nobody except me. I opened the old terrain scans my father left me before he died. Same hill. Same pressure points. Same warning circles marked in thick red ink. He used to tell me this entire ridge sat on layered runoff shelves from an old flood basin. Stable if managed carefully. Dangerous if sealed too tightly. Vanessa had just sealed it with concrete and cut the only emergency overflow line feeding the lower channels. A black SUV rolled onto my gravel driveway around 8 that morning. HOA legal counsel. Of course. The man stepped out wearing loafers already ruined by mud. He handed me a folded cease and desist notice while trying not to look at the crack spreading behind him. According to the letter, I was prohibited from interfering with ongoing community improvements or creating unnecessary panic among residents. I almost laughed reading that standing beside a hillside quietly tearing itself apart. Then I noticed something else. The HOA had filed emergency approval permits at 1:17 that morning. For minutes after the excavator breached my ridge. Backdated signatures. Fast-tracked county stamps. Somebody inside the planning office was helping them bury this before inspectors arrived. That changed everything. A deep metallic bang echoed downhill. We both turned at the same time. One of the decorative stone entrance signs near the subdivision gate had tilted sideways into the mud. Just a few inches. But enough for the lawyer's face to lose color. He tucked his folder under his arm and hurried back to the SUV without another word. I watched him fishtail down the wet road while the warning box near my garage kept blinking red through the mist. Then my weather radio crackled alive inside the kitchen window. Severe storm advisory. 12 inches possible by nightfall. That was when the Real clock started. By noon, the neighborhood sounded nervous. Garage doors kept opening and closing. Trucks rolled past my driveway slower than usual. People had started noticing the road dips. Water pooled where it never pooled before. One mailbox near Cedar Lane leaned so far sideways it looked drunk. Vanessa still pushed forward like none of it mattered. I watched her standing beside the cracked pool deck wearing sunglasses while workers unloaded limestone pavers into mud already too soft to hold the weight. Every few minutes, somebody glanced downhill. Nobody stayed relaxed for long. The storm clouds were coming back fast now. Thick gray sheets rolling over the ridge from the west. The pressure in the air made my ears pop when I stepped outside. I spent most of the afternoon inside my garage reviewing old survey files spread across my workbench. Rain tapped against the metal roof in soft bursts. The warning monitor beside me clicked every 30 seconds now instead of every minute. That was bad. Very bad. The lower runoff chambers were filling faster than expected. Then I found something I had not looked at in years. My father's emergency overflow map. Hand-drawn. Coffee stains on the corners. Notes written in thick carpenter pencil. One sentence circled twice. Never block west relief flow during saturation. Vanessa's crew had buried that exact relief channel under 6 inches of fresh concrete yesterday. My stomach tightened the second I saw it. Not fear. Recognition. Like seeing smoke under a locked door. A pickup truck pulled into my driveway before I could finish checking the old maps. It was Carl Bennett from Lot 22. Retired firefighter. Good man. He climbed out holding a broken sprinkler head covered in mud. This shot out of my yard 20 feet, he said. Water pressure has gone crazy since last night. I followed him downhill through cold wind carrying the smell of wet cedar and fresh concrete dust. Halfway there, I noticed tiny fractures zigzagging across 3 driveways near the new clubhouse site. Hairline cracks. Fresh. Some still leaking muddy water. Carl saw them too. Neither of us said much after that. His backyard looked worse. The ground around the sprinkler valve had swollen upward like bread dough. Water hissed beneath the soil. Not flowing right. Trapped. I knelt and pressed my palm against the grass. Vibrations again. Stronger this time. The hill was redistributing weight under the subdivision. Slowly. Quietly. Exactly how slope failures begin. Carl muttered one word under his breath. Damn. Back near the clubhouse site, Vanessa had started hosting an outdoor planning meeting under a white event tent while lightning flickered behind the ridge. Wine bottles sat on folding tables beside blueprints for the new terrace expansion. She was selling future property value increases while the ground shifted beneath everyone's feet. One resident pointed toward the tilted entrance sign near the gate. Vanessa laughed it off and blamed soil settling after rain. Then the earth answered her. A deep crack echoed beneath the pavement behind the tent. Sharp. Fast. Like a tree splitting in winter. Several heads turned at once. One of the workers dropped his shovel. The pool deck sank almost an inch before stopping. Silence hit the whole hill after that. Even the birds disappeared. Vanessa forced a smile and told everyone the situation was under control. But I noticed her gripping the blueprint tube hard enough to wrinkle it. She finally understood something was wrong. She just did not understand how late it already was. The rain came back just after sunset. Harder this time. Thick drops hammered the rooftop so loudly I could barely hear the warning monitor inside my garage. Water streamed down the ridge in crooked silver lines under the floodlights from the clubhouse site. Vanessa's contractors were still out there working. Still pouring concrete. Still trying to bury the problem before inspectors showed up in the morning. That alone told me how desperate they had become. Nobody keeps pouring concrete into saturated soil unless money is already on the line. I stood under my porch roof with a flashlight and watched muddy runoff spill across the unfinished terrace. The water should have drained west through the relief channel. Instead, it backed up against the new retaining forms they installed over my father's old overflow line. The hill was starting to hold water inside itself now. Like a sponge wrapped in plastic. Every few minutes, another dull pop echoed underground. Fence posts tilted farther. Fresh cracks climbed across the pavement near the subdivision entrance. One street lamp blinked twice and shut off completely. Then another. Somewhere downhill, a car alarm started chirping weakly in the rain. The neighborhood did not feel stable anymore. It felt loaded. My phone buzzed with 3 new HOA emails while I checked the monitoring screen. First was another warning accusing me of interfering with active construction by photographing the worksite. Second claimed the drainage issue was temporary and fully under professional supervision. The third one was different. Attached was a liability waiver sent to residents asking them to acknowledge minor weather-related settling risks connected to the clubhouse expansion. Vanessa was already trying to protect herself. Too late. I printed every email and spread them across my workbench beside the terrain scans. Rainwater dripped from my jacket sleeves onto the floor while the printer hummed in the dark garage. Then the monitor flashed solid red for the first time all day. A pressure spike. Fast and sharp. I looked at the live readings and felt my chest tighten. The west shelf under Cedar Lane had jumped nearly 20% in less than an hour. That should not happen unless runoff chambers were filling past capacity. I grabbed my flashlight and drove downhill through sheets of rain so thick the windshield looked underwater. The roads already felt uneven beneath the tires. At Cedar Lane, I found water bubbling straight through the asphalt near a storm drain. Not flowing around it. Through it. Muddy foam hissed from tiny cracks in the road while residents stood under umbrellas filming with their phones. One woman asked if a water main had burst. I told her no. A low rumble rolled beneath our feet before I could explain further. Not thunder this time. The ground itself. Several people stepped backward at once. Across the street, a decorative stone wall around a model home split down the center with a sound like breaking ice. Everyone went silent after that. Even the rain suddenly sounded louder. Then I saw Vanessa pulling up in her white Range Rover, tires splashing through muddy runoff. She stepped out holding a megaphone and started telling residents the situation was completely under control. Her voice echoed across the wet pavement while another crack slowly spread behind her through the middle of the road. She did not notice it yet. But I did. And it was heading straight toward the new clubhouse foundation. The crack reached the clubhouse foundation at 9:42 p.m. I watched it crawl through the wet concrete like lightning trapped under glass. Residents backed away from the road one step at a time while Vanessa kept talking into the megaphone like volume could stop physics. Rainwater rushed around everyone's shoes carrying pieces of mud and broken gravel downhill. The smell of wet cement hung thick in the air. Then the lights inside the temporary sales office flickered hard enough to make people scream. A transformer somewhere uphill gave a loud metallic boom. Darkness swallowed half the subdivision for 2 full seconds before backup lights kicked on. That was enough. Panic finally started spreading faster than the storm. Phones came out everywhere. Neighbors started recording the road, the leaning walls, the bubbling asphalt. Vanessa saw it happening and immediately switched tactics. Suddenly she wanted control of the narrative. She pointed directly at me standing near the drainage line and shouted that I had tampered with the slope monitoring system. Several heads turned toward me at once. I could feel the shift instantly. Fear makes people desperate for somebody to blame. Vanessa knew that. She started telling residents I had refused to cooperate with the HOA expansion project for months. That I had exaggerated soil concerns to stop development. That my private equipment was creating false readings. I almost admired how quickly she adapted. Almost. Then Carl Bennett stepped forward from the crowd still holding the broken sprinkler valve from earlier. Rain dripped from the brim of his old fire department cap while he stared Vanessa dead in the eye. "The road is sinking," he said flatly. "That is not a fake reading." More residents started noticing things after that. Front porches tilting slightly. Water pushing through lawns. One garage door hanging crooked where the frame had shifted. The subdivision no longer looked expensive. It looked fragile. Vanessa's attorney arrived 20 minutes later carrying folders inside a plastic grocery bag over his head. He pulled her aside near the sales office while thunder rolled above the ridge. I stayed close enough to hear pieces of the conversation through the rain. County inspector is already asking questions. You said permits were cleared. You never mentioned prior engineering warnings. Vanessa's face tightened with every sentence. Then she looked straight at me again. Not angry anymore. Calculating. That worried me more. She marched through the mud toward my truck while her heels sank into the soaked grass. Tell them this can still be stabilized, she said quietly. You are the engineer. Her perfume mixed strangely with the smell of wet dirt and diesel exhaust. For the first time all week, her voice sounded uncertain. I looked past her toward the ridge line above the clubhouse. Water was no longer draining off the slope. It was disappearing into it. That meant the underground shelves were filling completely. We were past stabilization now. We were entering failure territory. I told her exactly that. Her jaw locked tight. You are overreacting. Right on cue, another deep tremor rolled beneath the pavement. Not violent. Worse than that. Slow. Long controlled. Like the entire hill was adjusting its weight inch by inch. Somewhere downhill, glass shattered. Nobody moved for several seconds after the sound. Then emergency sirens echoed faintly from the highway beyond the subdivision entrance. Vanessa turned toward the noise so fast her umbrella slipped from her hand into the mud. That was when the first evacuation rumor started spreading through the crowd. Rain hammered the subdivision all night without slowing down once. By midnight, Willow Creek Estates looked nothing like the polished brochure Vanessa used to hand out at open houses. Water rushed down the streets in muddy streams. Lawn lights flickered under standing water. The expensive stone entrance sign had tilted even farther sideways until one corner rested against the soaked grass. I drove uphill again with my field tablet sliding across the passenger seat every time the truck bounced through another dip in the road. The entire subdivision felt uneven now. Like driving over buried waves. Emergency vehicles had finally arrived near the clubhouse entrance. 2 county inspectors stood under ponchos shining flashlights into the widening crack running through the pavement. They looked overwhelmed already. One of them recognized me from a slope stabilization project outside San Antonio years earlier. He walked over fast the second he saw my truck. Tell me this is fixable, he said before even saying hello. I looked past him toward the ridge. Water was pouring directly into the excavated trench where Vanessa's crew had cut through the retaining berm. The overflow chambers underneath the hill were completely sealed now. Pressure had nowhere left to release. Not tonight, I answered. He rubbed rainwater off his face and cursed under his breath. Then another sound rolled through the hill. Low. Heavy. Longer than before. Every parked car alarm along Cedar Lane chirped at once. A woman screamed somewhere near the pool construction site. We both turned toward the noise. One side of the unfinished terrace had dropped several inches into the mud. Clean and sudden. Like the ground simply gave up holding it. Workers backed away immediately. Their boots slipped through wet clay while portable floodlights shook in the wind. Vanessa stormed across the site yelling at everyone to stay calm. Her hair was soaked flat against her face now. No umbrella. No polished smile. Just panic hiding behind anger. She spotted the county inspectors and started talking before they could ask questions. The contractor assured us the slope was stable. We followed emergency guidance. This weather event was unpredictable. The older inspector cut her off mid-sentence. Did you remove a registered runoff structure without final county review? Silence hit harder than the thunder after that. Vanessa looked toward her attorney standing under the tent. He looked away immediately. That told me everything. The inspectors requested all permit records on the spot. Vanessa's hands actually trembled while she unlocked the sales office trailer. She knew those timestamps would not survive scrutiny. Backdated approvals. Missing engineering reviews. Ignored warnings. The paper trail was about to become radioactive. I stayed near the ridge checking live pressure readings while emergency crews started knocking on doors downhill. Some residents packed cars quietly. Others argued in driveways under the rain. Nobody wanted to believe their million-dollar homes sat on unstable ground because an HOA wanted a luxury terrace. Then my monitor emitted a sharp continuous tone I had never heard before. Not blinking anymore. Solid alarm. I froze looking at the readings. The west shelf had finally breached critical load tolerance. That meant the underground clay layers were beginning to slide over each other. Slowly for now. But movement had started. I looked uphill toward the dark ridge above the clubhouse. Water streamed down the exposed trench walls like veins. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop colder than the rain. Fresh cracks were spreading uphill now too. The failure was no longer moving in one direction. The first house shifted at 1:18 a.m. Not collapsed. Shifted. Quiet enough that most people missed it. I saw it happen from the ridge line through sheets of rain and flashing emergency lights. A two-story brick home near Cedar Lane tilted half a foot sideways as the saturated ground beneath the driveway slowly sagged downhill. The porch columns groaned. One upstairs window cracked from corner to corner with a sharp pop that carried through the storm. Then every dog in the subdivision started barking again. Emergency crews moved faster after that. Deputies went door to door telling residents to prepare for possible evacuation while utility workers shut down power to the lower streets. The neighborhood looked eerie in partial darkness. Porch lights glowing through rain. Hazard lights blinking red across flooded cul-de-sacs. Water rushing along curbs carrying mulch, branches, and broken chunks of asphalt downhill toward the drainage basin that no longer drained anything. I stood beside the county inspectors under the soaked event tent reviewing updated pressure scans on my tablet. Every reading kept climbing. The underground shelves beneath Willow Creek Estates were slipping exactly the way my father predicted decades ago. Layer by layer. Slow enough to build denial. Fast enough to destroy foundations. One inspector wiped rain from his flashlight lens and stared at the numbers. "How much time do we have?" he asked. Before I could answer, the hill answered for me. A deep rolling crack thundered uphill behind the clubhouse site. The sound was enormous now. Not hidden anymore. Residents screamed as part of the exposed slope above the terrace slumped downward several feet in one heavy motion, dragging wet trees and construction fencing with it. Muddy water exploded across the unfinished pool foundation. Workers ran immediately. Floodlights swung wildly through the rain while generators sputtered against rising water. Vanessa stood frozen near the sales trailer watching her luxury terrace disappear inch by inch into the hillside. Her attorney grabbed her arm trying to pull her toward the evacuation vehicles, but she yanked away and pointed at me again. Even now. Even standing inside the disaster she created. "You knew this would happen," she shouted through the storm. Her voice sounded ragged for the first time since I met her. "You could have stopped it." Rainwater poured off the brim of my jacket while I stared at the broken ridge behind her. The cut overflow line. The buried relief channel. The cracked foundations. Every warning ignored because she thought dirt could be negotiated like a property listing. "I tried," I told her. She opened her mouth to argue again, but another section of pavement dropped behind the clubhouse with a violent grinding noise. The sales trailer shifted sideways almost a full foot. That finally shut everyone up. Deputies started clearing the entire upper street immediately after that. Engines roared. Car doors slammed. Flashlights bounced through heavy rain while families loaded pets, suitcases, and soaked cardboard boxes into SUVs. The air smelled like wet clay and overheated transformers. Somewhere downhill, a gas line alarm started shrieking in steady pulses. I kept checking the pressure monitor every 30 seconds. The numbers were no longer climbing gradually now. They were spiking. Fast. Then the monitor screen flickered once before displaying a new warning across the bottom. Secondary shelf instability detected. I stared at the message while cold rain ran down the back of my neck. The main hillside was failing. But now the ridge above it was starting to move too. The upper ridge started breaking apart at 2:07 a.m. I heard the roots snap before I saw movement. A cluster of cedar trees above the clubhouse leaned forward together as the soaked hillside beneath them slowly folded downward. Mud rolled across the construction site in thick waves, swallowing stacks of limestone and knocking portable fencing flat into the slurry. Floodlights flickered through the rain. Like dying candles. Then the emergency sirens changed tone. That sharp rising pattern meant mandatory evacuation. Deputies started shouting through loudspeakers while residents scrambled to leave the subdivision. Engines revved everywhere. Tires spun uselessly in mud near the lower streets. One moving truck slid sideways against a curb after the pavement beneath it cracked open another few inches. The whole neighborhood sounded alive now. Groaning wood. Popping concrete. Water hissing through buried pipes under pressure. And beneath all of it, the deep shifting sound of the hill slowly tearing itself apart underground. I stayed near the ridge with the county inspectors because somebody had to monitor where the movement was heading next. My tablet screen was covered in rainwater, but the readings were still clear enough to terrify me. The secondary shelf instability was accelerating uphill toward the clubhouse foundation exactly where Vanessa buried the relief channel. If that section gave way completely, the entire upper terrace would slide into the lower subdivision like wet sand. One inspector radioed for additional geotechnical support from Austin while the other ordered crews to shut off gas and water service to the entire neighborhood. Good call. The utility lines were already under stress. We heard another metallic boom downhill seconds later as a transformer failed near Cedar Lane. Darkness spread across the subdivision one block at a time until only emergency lights and headlights remained cutting through the rain. Then Vanessa made the worst decision yet. She ran back toward the sales office trailer. Her attorney screamed after her, but she ignored him completely. I realized why the second I saw her disappear inside. The permit records. The contracts. The backdated approvals. She was trying to save paperwork while the hill collapsed around her. 2 deputies moved after her immediately, but another tremor hit before they reached the trailer. The ground lurched hard enough to throw muddy water across the parking area. Several residents screamed as the unfinished pool foundation cracked straight down the middle with a sound like splitting stone. The entire terrace dropped again. This time nearly 2 feet. One corner of the sales trailer twisted sideways off its support blocks. Vanessa stumbled out seconds later clutching soaked folders against her chest while deputies dragged her away from the edge of the shifting ground. Even from 30 feet away, I could see terror on her face now. Real terror. The kind money cannot negotiate away. Rain poured off the ridge in heavy streams carrying chunks of clay and broken roots downhill. Then the monitor in my hand emitted one long solid alarm tone so loud the inspector beside me flinched. I looked at the updated terrain model and felt every muscle in my neck tighten at once. The movement pattern had changed. The hillside was no longer slipping gradually. The upper shelf had detached completely. I raised my flashlight toward the ridge just as a massive crack ripped across the soaked earth above the clubhouse site. It stretched through the hill like a zipper opening in the dark. And suddenly the entire slope started moving at once. The hillside let go with a sound I will never forget. Not an explosion. Not a crash. A deep rolling roar like the earth itself finally exhaled after holding too much weight for too long. The entire upper slope began sliding downhill in slow motion at first. Trees tilted sideways. Mud folded over itself in massive waves. The unfinished clubhouse terrace cracked apart under the pressure and disappeared into the moving earth piece by piece. Residents standing near the evacuation line screamed and backed toward the flashing patrol cars while deputies forced everyone farther downhill. Rain hammered against my jacket so hard it stung my neck. The ground beneath us kept trembling in uneven pulses. Portable floodlights toppled into the mud one after another, throwing wild shadows across the collapsing slope. Then the old relief tunnel finally reopened. I heard the steel emergency gate rupture somewhere beneath the hill with a metallic shriek that echoed through the entire subdivision. Water burst through the buried runoff channels all at once. Thick brown torrents surged downhill across the construction site carrying broken fencing, shattered concrete forms, and uprooted landscaping into the flooded lower streets. But the pressure release changed everything. The movement slowed. Not immediately. Slowly. Like a giant machine grinding itself toward a stop. I watched the terrain readings stabilize line by line on my tablet while emergency crews pulled residents farther from the danger zone. One county inspector leaned against his truck breathing hard while staring at the destroyed clubhouse site. If that tunnel had not reopened, he muttered, this whole ridge would have gone. He was right. The old drainage system my father designed had just saved half the subdivision after the HOA spent months trying to bury it under concrete and luxury landscaping. Dawn finally started pushing through the storm clouds around 5 in the morning. The rain weakened to a cold mist drifting across broken pavement and mud-soaked lawns. Willow Creek Estates looked unrecognizable in daylight. Streets warped and cracked. Several homes condemned immediately. The luxury terrace reduced to a collapsed scar of clay and shattered stone halfway down the slope. Emergency tape flapped in the wet wind where golf carts and patio furniture used to sit beside architectural renderings of the future clubhouse expansion. Vanessa sat alone on the back step of an ambulance wrapped in a gray blanket staring at the destroyed hillside without speaking. Her attorney stood 20 feet away talking to county officials while holding a stack of soaked permit records inside a plastic evidence bag. Investigators moved through the subdivision all morning photographing everything. The severed runoff line. The buried drainage vents. The backdated approvals. My certified warning letters. One federal environmental engineer asked me how long ago the relief system was originally installed. 30 years, I answered. He shook his head slowly while looking at the collapsed terrace. Then somebody ignored 30 years of engineering. By afternoon, county officials suspended every active HOA construction permit connected to Vanessa's board. Insurance representatives started arriving too. That part almost felt quieter than the storm. No yelling. No sirens. Just people. In clean jackets taking photographs of damage nobody wanted responsibility for anymore. I drove back to my ridge near sunset after the evacuation orders finally lifted. The air smelled like wet cedar and fresh earth. Pieces of broken concrete still rested at the bottom of the slope where the terrace had slid apart overnight. My warning monitor beside the garage blinked green for the first time in 2 days. Stable. I stood there listening to water moving safely through the reopened relief tunnel beneath the hill. Then I looked downhill at the subdivision built on top of everything my father tried to protect. Gravity had finished the argument for me,